right, there have been a lot of top 10 bass bait lists over the years, but I don't think there's been one that focuses just on tournament bass baits. The 10 best tournament bass baits of all time. So hey, we put one together. A lot of research talking about who won with a particular bait, who finished high or wins and high finishes with a particular bait, a couple of other things about how influential it's been, how many guys use it anyway on the Pro Tour, whether they're sponsored or not, or it influenced baits that they use that just like it or not. But anyway, we're going to start at number 10 and count down to number 1. And the number 10 best tournament bass bait of all time is the Megabass Vision 110 Jerkbait. Well-known Missouri angler Randy Blockett helped Megabass's Yoki Ito develop this bait in the late 90s, and it got here in late 2000, but it really didn't take off till the mid to late 2000s because guys were keeping it quiet because it worked.
Always keep your mouth shut.
A bunch of top tournament pros have won or finished high with it over the years, and they still are, including Hank Cherry's 2020 BassMaster Classic win. The Vision 110 definitely has set the standard for all other jerkbaits, but it's on this list because it's used in tournaments and helps guys win. Here's number 9, the War Eagle spinnerbait. Now, of course, spinnerbaits have been used forever in tournament bass fishing, but the War Eagle has been used to win and finish high more than any other. In fact, the War Eagle brand and baits made its bones by being a kind of the under-the-radar brand of spinnerbait and also buzz baits for a lot of top pros, no matter who they were sponsored by, because the baits ran great. They had great components and amazing colors. Who's going to be number 8? Stay tuned, Pete's. Stay tuned, peeps. And number 8 is a drop-shotted Robo worm. When drop shots hit the West Coast from Japan, I believe it was in the 90s, guys like Aaron Martins and Brett Ayler started smashing fish with them and winning tournaments. Aaron was like a one-man force teaching us and his fellow pros about the drop shot and showing us how effective it was. And by the way, if you thought he loved fishing the drop shot, that's not necessarily true. One time he told me he didn't even like fishing it. I don't know if that was just his state of mind at the time, but he said it just gets bites. And that's what he was about as a pro fisherman. Aaron won tournaments drop-shotting robo worms all over the country from 2007, his first bass win, to the One Bass US Open, more BassMaster wins, and also a Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour win too. Based on Aaron's success with it alone, it almost could make this list, but it's number 8 on this list because it's helped many fishermen, a drop-shotted robo worm, finish high in tournaments, including the top pros, many of whom still carry robo worms in their boats, no matter who they're sponsored by. And number 7 is the Kitech Fat Swing Impact Swim Bait. All right, Kitech was started in 1996 in Japan by Japanese pro Kai Hayashi, who somehow has no pics on the web, but all bass fishermen are grateful to him for this bait, man. Who knew this little rib swim bait would have such great action and mojo? It caught him and helped finesse techniques take off here, and lots of high finishes and wins on the major tournament trails got the word out even more. It's a great bait that continues to catch largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, whatever bass there are, you name it. I remember back in 2006 when some kid named Brian Thrift won the kickoff event for the 2006 tournament season. It was the FLW Stren Series event on Lake Okeechobee. He won it with this new bait called a chatterbait. And then the very next week on the same lake, the FLW Tour had an event there, and a bunch of guys almost won that event on the same bait. Well, believe it or not, that was all she wrote. That bait took off, and a little but not so little company named Z-Man has been doing really well with the chatterbait and a bunch more chatterbaits ever since. But then in 2016-17, pro anglers Brett Hite and Marizo Shimizu teamed with Evergreen and Z-Man to come out with the Chatterbait Jackhammer, which to date is the gold, silver, platinum, and diamond standard in bladed jigs. It flat out crushes them.
The Jackhammer.
As we all know, that bladed jig in particular is all over tournaments because it's the bomb, man. And number 5 is the Spro Dean Rojas Bronzei Frog. It's the OG topwater frog that came looking cool and ready to fish right out of the package and really established the category, and for sure caught them and catches them, including for Dean. All right, the Spro Bronzei debuted in the 2000s and is still going strong. Okay, the 4th best tournament bait of all time so far is the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. Who knew back in 2002 when FLW Tour Pro Andre Moore decided to start his own soft plastic bait company that the Sweet Beaver would become one of the most flipped and sold and mimicked flipping baits of all time? Well, maybe Andre did, because in 2002 he won a tournament with it, then won at the same lake with it in 2005, and guess what that lake is called? Beaver Lake in Arkansas. Now, everybody who flips uses a beaver or beaver style bait at some point during the year, no doubt. And the 3rd best bait of all time is Zoom worms. It could have kind of been Zoom everything, almost every soft plastic. They've been such an innovator and so many guys use them and win with them, but we had to go with worms. Trick worm, finesse worm, old monster, speed worm. You name it, Zoom's got worms, and they catch them. Genius bait designer Ed Chambers started Zoom in 1977, making them in a barn because he wanted shapes he couldn't buy. He was a fisherman, and other people started buying them, and that was all she wrote. Way too many wins and high finishes on Zoom worms, which is why they're on this list, and number 3 on this list. I can't mention them all, but a couple that come to mind are Gerald Swindle's Angler of the Year wins, and then Brian Thrift winning the FLW Cup in 2019. He used a Zoom worm among other baits. And we're down to number 2, and number 2 is Strike King Jigs. Of course, jigs are one of the most fished bass bait types of all time, for sure, and statistically speaking, Strike King jigs have been mentioned more times in wins and top finishes in recent tournament history, major tournaments, than any other type of jig. And really, that's no surprise when you've got guys like Denny Brower, who made a career of and is one of the best bass fishermen of all time from flipping notably Strike King baits, including a jig. Then you got Greg Hackney, who's on the same trajectory with his Hack Attack jigs, Strike King jigs. And of course, there's that guy, Kevin Van Dam, who's won just about everything there is to win multiple times using Strike King baits, including Strike King jigs. Now, none of that was really an accident, because Strike King set the bar in getting their pros to develop baits, which then the pros would fish, and they were good and did well with. Now, everybody does that, gets pros to develop baits, but Strike King was really the first to either do that or really put the hammer down and make that how they did things. The number 1 tournament bass bait of all time to date is Strike King crankbaits. Now, you think about crankbaits are great at covering water, they're great at all different depths, and now you combine that with where the tournaments go to fish, at what times of the year, and these guys like Kevin Van Dam and Keith Combs, who are amazing with crankbaits, and Kevin, that stretch of, I don't know, 20 years when he won everything there was to win at least twice. You get the number 1 bait of all time so far, the Strike King crankbait. That means these are the most fished baits in major wins and high finishes at the top tours and also the next couple levels. KVD's victories alone could make a case for this bait being number 1. Multiple tour level wins, including BassMaster Classics, using the Strike King 6XD, the 1.5 square bill, the 10XD, and others. and other Strike King pros have done well with them too. Notably Keith XD Combs with the Series 5 and the 6XD. Other Strike King pros also like Mark Rose, Greg Hackney and others, and many guys fishing at other levels. Congrats to Strike King, who was the only company to show up twice on this list, and it was #1 and #2. Can they keep it rolling? We'll be watching.